This week, President Trump announced that U.S. troops would stay out of the way as Turkey looks to invade northern Syria, opening the door to further instability in the Middle East. How this affects Israel and why you should care coming up soon, along with an update on Israel's continued lack of government and a unique prayer for Yom Kippur. I'm Lev Gringaus, and welcome to The Jews Are Tired, your podcast about Jewish news. So let's jump into this situation in northern Syria. On a quick tangent, I know this may not seem like Jewish news now, but bear with me. First, some admittedly oversimplified background. Syria has been ravaged by civil war since 2011. Amongst the many things to come out of that war has been ISIS, the terrorist group that has launched attacks around the world and briefly controlled the so-called Caliphate or Islamic State in parts of Syria and Iraq. Nowadays, ISIS has been largely driven underground and the Caliphate has been dismantled. So you might be thinking, how? Well, enter the Kurds. The Kurds are a Middle Eastern ethnic group long settled in parts of what is now Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. Much like the Jews, they've been walked all over by everybody. We're talking oppression and genocide for years. You get the idea. But over the past few decades, the Kurds have developed powerful armies and militias, many of which have been involved in the fight against ISIS. With United States support, it's really been Kurdish bodies on the line in bloody battles to get rid of the terror group. What this means is that after defeating ISIS, a large part of northern Syria is controlled by Kurdish forces. But northern Syria borders Turkey, and Turkey hates the Kurds. So Turkey has been ripping to go into northern Syria, take over, and wipe them out. And the U.S. is going to let them. On Sunday, after a phone call between President Trump and President Erdogan of Turkey, the White House press secretary released a statement that said, quote, Turkey will soon be moving forward with its long-planned operation into northern Syria. The United States Armed Forces will not support or be involved in the operation, and United States forces having defeated the ISIS territorial caliphate will no longer be in the immediate area. Translation, Turkey is coming for the Kurds, the U.S. is abandoning its ally. And the ramifications are major. Number one, I'll let this quote from a Kurdish official said to NBC News speak for itself. Quote, the Americans are traitors. They have abandoned us to a Turkish massacre. We can no longer fight against ISIS and have to defend ourselves. This could allow ISIS to return to the region. End quote. Number two, if the U.S. is going to drop allies like this, who is going to trust or work with the U.S. in the future? If ISIS comes back, what countries and what groups are going to want to ally with the U.S. to fight them again? And number three, to tie it all back together about why I think this is an essential part of the Jewish news cycle, Syria and Turkey are in Israel's backyard. That's a country of 9 million people, over 6.7 million Jews, where any instability in the Middle East means more threats to have to deal with. Syria's instability has already enabled Iran, Russia, and Iranian proxy groups like Hezbollah to gain in strength and tactical position against Israel. Iran and Hezbollah have already been launching attacks from Syria against Israel that hopefully you either didn't hear about or forgot about, because Israel has been on a major offensive to intercept attacks and prevent future ones. ISIS, newsflash, is also no friend of Israel. But part of the point that I really want to get to, if you excuse my getting preachy for a moment, is this. In the Jewish community, we all love dishing out on one another about whether Trump is or isn't a good or the best president for Israel. Trump moves the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which Israel recognizes as its capital. Okay, we all get in a fight about it. Trump officially recognizes the Golan Heights, territory taken from Syria in the Six-Day War in 1967, as part of Israel. Okay, let's all get into a fight about that. But I can't help but get angry when we ignore the broader scope of decision-making happening in the Middle East and in the world that very seriously puts Israel in more danger. I don't care much for fighting about embassy moves. What matters is the real active situation that here Trump has just made worse. And even with my Israel lens here, let's not forget the core of this story. Trump has made things worse for a people who did not deserve it and who have already been abandoned time and time again by the rest of the world. Among Kurds, a common saying is that, quote, "we have no friends but the mountains," end quote. Now, in lighter and sillier news, here's an update on Israel's political insanity. To sum up where things are now, longtime Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was tasked roughly 2 weeks ago to create a majority coalition in the Knesset, which is Israel's 120-seat parliament. At the moment, he can't do it. So Israel just doesn't have a government. Neither the right wing, led by Netanyahu, nor the left wing, led by Benny Gantz, blocks of parties have the 61-plus seat majority in the Knesset to form a government. And things have gotten weird. In the category of decisions that I guess would be okay, but never mind, last week Netanyahu said he would hold leadership elections for his political party, the Likud. This would theoretically mean that someone other than Netanyahu could be elected to lead the party, and no one would have to deal with Netanyahu anymore. But then he canceled those elections because his allies told him he'd most likely lose. In the category of political moves that make no sense to anybody outside of Israel, Yair Lapid, the number 2 in blue and white, the rival party to Likud, announced he wouldn't try and be in a rotation of prime ministers with blue and white head Benny Gantz. The only reason this makes sense is that the best bet for an Israeli government would be for Likud and blue and white to get together and form a national unity government. One of the compromises to make this happen would be that Netanyahu would be prime minister for 2 years of a 4-year term, and Gantz would take the other 2 years. What had been complicating this, other than its complete insanity, is that Yair Lapid joined blue and white on the condition that he would get to rotate the position of prime minister with Gantz. So Netanyahu could use this as political leverage against Gantz and call him crazy for trying to have 3 people in a rotation. But now that Lapid said he's not going for the rotation of prime ministers, the pressure is back on Netanyahu to compromise. Totally whack, right? And finally, in the category of, oh, you're kidding, get it over with, please now, Monday marked the end of 4 days of pre-trial hearings for Netanyahu in 3 corruption cases. Most of the days, the hearings were going on for 10 or 11 hours straight. At the latest, results should come down in December, at the earliest, next month. The results of the corruption cases could shape Netanyahu's future in politics. Oh, and Netanyahu has only until October 24th with a possible 2-week extension as his deadline to form a government. Oi is all I can say. Now, for our last story. As of this podcast airing, tonight begins Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. If you're fasting, I wish you an easy fast, and to everyone regardless of fasting, wishing you a meaningful day. Of course, as with everything high holiday related, religiosity and spirituality can be hard. Sitting in synagogue and praying can be hard. Trying to have a day of meaning when everything else is still whipping around can be hard. But I'm hoping this prayer, written by Rabbi John Perlman with Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum, Martin Cohen, and Tova Admon, can give us a moment of Yom Kippur spirituality, regardless of what we may be doing on the day itself. Just a warning, it is intense. At its core is this fight we have as a people and as individuals with God about how evil can inhabit our world and what it even means to think about God. This prayer is based off of a traditional piece of liturgy for Yom Kippur, which remembers the deaths of 10 famous rabbis as martyrs during Roman times. A connection is also made to Abraham's sacrifice or near sacrifice of Isaac. This particular prayer has been changed to remember those who were killed in the Pittsburgh shooting a year ago. The person who typed it up was asked to share it far and wide, so I'm sharing it with you. These things do I remember, and my heart is grieved, how the arrogant have devoured our people. Who would believe that in our day there would be no intervention for the 11 slaughtered from our holy community? That Shabbat morning was like every Shabbat. The 20 early risers from the 3 shuls came to read Parshat Vayera from the Torah. And they did not know, nor could they see in the reflection of God's mystery, that the portion would reveal what would happen to them. And they read, Abraham rose early and brought his servant lads, and his only son who he loved. They went to Mount Moriah together, his son Isaac by his side and 2 lads behind. They walked 3 days in silence. They went in hushed voices, for nothing occurred to them. Finally they arrived at Moriah, and there God tested Abraham. And Abraham let the youths rest at the bottom of the hill. God said to Abraham, Ascend to me on the hill, and I will test you there. And they saw, and Abraham rose, he ascended the mountain of God, the hill of Moriah, and a cloud covered the mountain, and God called to him, saying, Thus will you say to the house of Jacob, and thus will you tell the house of Israel, You will be holy, for I am holy, and everyone who wishes to enter my covenant and visit my sanctuary, that time when the many will come to sanctify my holy name in public, and to the living God they will call. And unto the sanctity of life and of love that is implanted in every heart. And then the group returned, Abraham leading, and they walked separately to their homes, and they were silent, all of them, in reaction to the frightful vision their eyes saw. And thus they heard from behind the veil of mystery, And if I ask in your bitterness, this is Torah, and this is its reward, my answer is known. It has been decreed. Don't dwell too much on what separates you from me. What occurred in our holy sanctuary that day, as the enemy came to tread upon our holy space, his wielding sword to break apart our memories from that place, the sanctified recalled a few that remained. Among some, their faces turned to one another before Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Among some, their faces turned toward the door to welcome new faces. Among some, they quickly assisted their friends in finding their place in the Siddur. Among some, those engaged in Torah study, and among some who were in the kitchen preparing the next meal. And to the 11, God spoke in a whisper, The time has arrived to sanctify my name in public. And I know you did not ask for this. Even so, they would be remembered and looked upon as personally bound to the altar as one united. For in the future, their children and congregations would remember that we are sanctifiers of life, who come to live, for we arose, we stood as your followers in your path, for we remembered faith and friendship here toward your light. We buried our bodies, and upon them we wept, and even so this did not break us. Nonetheless, we were steadfast in our place, and we continued to stand, and so our Father, our King, act for the sake of those who were slaughtered for your holy name. And act for the babies and children and for all the people of your faith. Remember us, our King, for we keep you in mind. Help us, our King, for we prayed to you. Save us, our Creator, for our eyes are upon you. As long as this breath is within us, we ponder the world you created for us. And evening and morning, each and every day, we gather and we cry out as one, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. This has been this week's The Jews Are Tired podcast. I'm Lev Gringauz, and hopefully next week, the Jews will get some rest. The Jews Are Tired is a product of Jewfolk Inc. For more information, go to tcjewfolk.com or email the show at podcast@tcjewfolk.com.